Next, we're going to talk about language. So, we spent a lot of time discussing the different concepts and how we build those concepts, take in those experiences. And those concepts are important for understanding for cognitive psychology because we want to understand not only the topics we're thinking about, but how we come to think about those topics. And so language is very important. They're the basic unit through which we gain that knowledge. By discussing, maybe teaching a toddler different shapes, right? You're conveying that information to give them something to work with in terms of their schema regarding shapes. Language is so critical to how we develop and process information, how we take it in. And I'm one of those people, because of what I've studied with psychology and language, who overanalyzes jokes. So I'm no fun if you tell a joke that you think I would enjoy because I'm a white woman. Totally unacceptable in all forms because those jokes have the capacity to affect how you think about people. Let's say you make a sexist joke or a joke about people of a different race or ethnicity. Those jokes have the potential to affect how you think about those groups. It can reinforce some ideas you have about those groups. Not only that, but you're perpetuating that information to someone else. And I'd call you to question why you think that joke is funny in the first place. It's because you may think there's some snippet of truth, but it's funny. Right? Well, it's only true because you're using cognitive biases. You're only seeing what you want to see in different groups. So, basically what I'm getting at, those jokes are stupid. And you are not stupid if you engage in those jokes. I want to clarify that. I'm calling you to question why you think those are funny if this relates to you. I just want you to use that cognitive effort to understand yourself. And how you interact with your world, especially when it comes to our biases and stereotypes about others. And we're going to talk about this more in social psychology, but I felt like it was really pertinent right now. But anyway, back to language. So the learning unit. Basically what you need to know is it's going to be a communication system that involves using words and systematic rules to organize those words to transmit information from one individual to another, right? We know what our English language speech is. We have an idea of basic units of measure. That's why me talking right now, you're able to understand me because you've gone through and learned so much about language because you are just so dang intelligent and hardworking that you've worked your butt off all your life to understand that. And remember, different languages are going to have different meanings and phrases and terms for different concepts. So we have to question if those different languages affect someone's perception. Okay? And we'll get to that in a second. You don't have to know all these components for our exam, but I'm putting them out there because I want you to see how minute even the little details of language are. And think about every word that you've ever said or written, right? We have rules of our language. In order for you to convey what you are trying to think, you're engaging in complex thought. You're trying to tell me what you are thinking when you write a paper. And right now I'm trying to gather my thoughts to convey this material in a way that's presentable and relatable. So that's the importance of language. It helps us to build up our knowledge stores. This is just a little fun tidbit from a preview for developmental psychology. But you see that language will progress in different kind of stages depending on our age. You learn so much language in the first 12 years of your life, particularly in the first 0 to 5 years. Your brain is going through so much development, and it's kind of like if you don't use it, you lose it kind of thing with our different cognitive structures. So you want to engage young children as much as you possibly can. And through language preferably. That's why we have a lot of American Medical Association has a lot of stipulations concerning screen time and TV. But that's a conversation for another day. Skinner, just to relate language to some other branches of psychology, Skinner, as a part of behaviorism, remember, he didn't care too much about the cognitive component, what we thought. He was more concerned about how do we reinforce language development. So when a baby goes at you and you go, yay, good job, you clap and you smile, that's reinforcement for the child. And so Skinner believed that through reinforcement and shaping, we were able to kind of change how children develop language. That is a very, think about how complicated a process is to help children develop language. I have a toddler right now, and oh my goodness, it is difficult, right? But we gradually build those steps to help them acquire all this language and information, and they just kind of soak it up like sponges. Anyway, thought that was a cool little tangent. But we think about language, and I pose the question to you, think about why some jokes other people may think are inappropriate, right? Why you think those are funny. Well, that's kind of what we're looking at in this section, language and thought. Can language shape the way we think about things? So Sapir and Whorf kind of proposed this hypothesis back in 1941, a long time ago. It was looking at, does the language we use shape our thoughts? Or do our thoughts shape our choice of language? Now, they didn't have the best hypothesis. This is more like Freud. They had a good idea, just not the best execution. But it was so inspiring for so much cognitive research that we're still looking at this question today. And so I've included some interesting studies, including Boroditsky's study that's mentioned in your text about Mandarin Chinese versus English speakers. And it's just talking about those differences in language, because culture and language are going to affect our psychology. And we're going to learn more about this. But habits in language can encourage habits in thought, and that's what we're looking at here. I highly suggest you read the abstract, at least if you don't want to read the article. The abstract gives you the basics of what they're looking at, why they chose to examine that, and what results they got. So I highly recommend just reading the abstract of that study. And then also there was a Berlin and Case color study. This is really interesting. Basically, they wanted to see if language affected perceptual phenomenon. So basically, they went to a group of people that didn't have a word for different colors. Like we have red, orange, yellow, blue, green, violet, right? Well, they wanted to go to a group that only had words such as dark or light, that didn't really have words for color. They wanted to see if people within that group could identify a color such as orange, even if they didn't have a word for it. So could not having a word for it affect how you perceive that color? Would they still see orange? Well, despite the fact that it was really interesting, they did not find anything to support their hypothesis. These groups still perceived the color, despite not having words for it. Spoiler alert. And then there's also the case of Jeannie Wiley, which just emphasizes the importance of language and thought. If y'all have taken sociology before, I think Ashley Howard shows this video sometimes. It's a great informative piece. It's a case study into language. And unfortunately for Jeannie Wiley, she endured so much childhood trauma. She was tied to like a little chair type toilet thing for the first 12 years of her life in a dark room. And the only human interaction she had was when her parents fed her. They didn't even talk to her. And so this young girl had no language development for an engagement for 12 years of her life. So that can result in a lot of issues, cognitive issues. And we see that play out in her life because when cognitive psychologists came in to study her, despite their best efforts, she wasn't able to process information past the level of like a 2 to 3 year old toddler. And so it just demonstrates the importance of language and thought in developing our cognitive skills. And so I've included a supplementary documentary to a full, I think it's 67-minute video of Jeannie Wiley if you care to have more information. If you watch the movie and write a 1-page write-up on like how Jeannie Wiley connects to the concepts in our course, I'll offer you 5 extra credit points. But do not summarize the movie, because I will not give you extra credit points for something that I can watch myself or read off of IMDb. Next, problem solving. So, now we've talked about our cognitive structures, how we think about things, how these different components of language affect how we accumulate information. Now we're looking at how do we manipulate it, okay? So we're going to look at problem-solving strategies. You have trial and error, which is just continuing different solutions until the problem is solved. And sometimes these solutions make no sense. So let's say your phone is malfunctioning. You're not connecting to the internet. You may turn off and on the internet a few times. You may turn on and off your Bluetooth. You may go downstairs and turn on and off your router in your house. Maybe you'll restart your phone a couple times. That's trial and error. An algorithm is a step-by-step problem-solving formula. These are used in mathematics. You think of PEMDAS, or Please Excuse My Dear Aunt Sally, where you have a specific order through which you solve problems to approach the right solution. And this could also be following an instruction manual for installing software on your computer, or maybe a game on your Xbox, or what have you. There's very specific steps, and if one step is missed, it's probably going to malfunction. And a heuristic, think of that, an algorithm is very specific. A heuristic is very broad. It's going to be the general framework through which you work. So this is the idea of working backwards, right? Let's say you have a wedding you have to take pictures for on Friday. Well, they want the pictures by the next Friday. So you know that it takes about 2 days for the pictures to develop. Okay, I know that's old school, thinking of developing rooms and stuff. 2 days for the pictures to develop. About 2 days for you to get home and organize with the proper SIM cards, and about 2, okay, you see what I'm doing? You're taking that end goal and working backwards. That's a heuristic. You don't have a really specific task. You can do things kind of out of order, but you're working backwards to kind of establish your timeline and the steps you want to take. So we have those basic problem-solving strategies, but we also have a lot of pitfalls to problem solving, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about because people don't realize we do these, and I do them even as a person who knows extensively about them. So a mental set is the idea that you approach a problem in the same way because it's worked for you in the past, even though it's obviously not working now. So let's say with our phones not connecting to the internet, we're going to keep turning it on and off again, and maybe your husband or your wife says, "Honey, why don't you just take it to the Sprint store?" No. I turned it on and off again before and it's worked, so I'm going to keep trying to do this. That's a mental set. You're stuck in your ways. Whereas functional fixedness is this idea that you see an object, such as a stapler. You know what it's used for, to put papers together. Well, if you are so fixed on that object's function, you may not see the utility that this object has. Because if, let's say, a breeze comes in through the classroom, all the papers are flying around, and you see a stapler on the table next to you, you may take that stapler and put it on a stack of papers like a paperweight. So you don't have any problems with functional fixedness. But someone who may not be able to see that object, such as a stapler, being used as something other than what it was designed for, may have problems with their papers flying around. We also have a lot of biases in our thinking. And this is where we get to kind of touch on those stereotypes that we start forming. And you'll see what I mean. So let's go through these different biases because these will be on your exam. Please make sure you know them and can give an example. So an anchoring bias. This is your tendency to focus on one particular piece of information when making a decision or problem solving. So think that you're in a boat and you drop the anchor. The anchor is so heavy that you're not moving from that spot. So think of that anchor as that one piece of information you have. So let's say you decided you're going to go find a new place to rent out, okay? And you're like, no, I need a place that's under $600 a month. Well, that is going to anchor the rest of your information. That's going to control your decision making. So let's say you found a really nice place for $300 a month. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 4,000 square feet. Obviously, I'm making up information. Some of you might be like, Elizabeth, that does not make sense. Right. because there's other information we're not looking at. That's a lot of square footage, a lot of bedrooms, a lot of bathrooms for only $300. So, you know, where is this place located? It could be in the middle of a garbage dump, for all we know. But we're so focused on the price that we're not looking at that other information. Then we have the confirmation bias. This is what everyone uses all the time. Why? Because humans like to be right. Okay? You're focusing on information that confirms your existing beliefs. Okay? If you believe that blonde white women, like myself, like to go to Starbucks, and you see a blonde white woman at the Starbucks, you're going to be like, see? There it is. I told you. Those white girls, they like Starbucks. And I'm speaking on behalf of my experiences as a blonde white woman, just because there are other experiences I can't speak to. But maybe someone would say that about me if I went to Starbucks, right? They'd be like, see, look, she likes it a lot, even though I do not, because it's egregiously expensive. But anyway, that's a side note. But I'm focusing on information that confirms my existing beliefs. If I believe that all frat guys wear Sperry's and cut off t-shirts and Ray-Bans, and I see a bunch of them wearing that type of stuff around ECU, I might be like, look, see, I told you that's what frat guys were like. Look at them right there. But you're ignoring all the times that you didn't see those men dressed like that, or all the times that you saw people of different races and sexes going to Starbucks. So sometimes we overlook the information that runs counter to what we're thinking. Now, hindsight bias is the belief that the event just experienced was predictable. We do this a lot with research. I'm sure there have been some of these theories that we've learned about where you went, no duh, that makes sense, right? Well, think of it this way. If I told you that I had the results of a study into attraction and love, and I found that actually people in long-distance relationships feel more love towards their partners than people who cohabitate before marriage, you might say, oh, well, that makes sense. You know, they're farther away from each other. They miss each other more, right? But if I told you the opposite, if I said, well, actually, people who cohabitate or live together before they're married demonstrate more love and affection than people who participate in long-distance relationships, you might also say, oh, that makes sense because they're living together. They want to be with each other. They're with each other all the time. That builds love, right? That's this idea of hindsight bias. I literally just gave you two made-up studies, right, with opposite results, and they could both make sense depending on how we rationalized hearing them. That's the hindsight bias, or the I knew it all along phenomenon. Then you also have a representative bias. This is the unintentional stereotyping of someone or something. Basically, you think that person is representative of all people within that group. So let's say you see a sorority girl. What do you think of? Maybe the TikToks where they're cheering really loudly and they're clapping and doing the chants and they're all blonde and wearing the same big t-shirt under the little shorts, so it looks like they're not wearing pants, right? Because that's what that's what I had last semester. That's what the students told me their stereotypes of sorority girls were, right? They're using, and I said, where did you get that stereotype from? And one of them said, oh, my cousin dresses exactly like that and does all that stuff. So, and then I saw they all dress like that. That student's cousin acted as a representative for that stereotype of people. Again, this student didn't have all of the information about the other types of sorority girls there are out there. They only looked at their cousin and said, well, she's a sorority girl and she dresses like this, so she must be what all of them are like. And that's a problem with thinking, that's a pitfall because we're not taking in all the information. And despite the fact that there are a lot of people around here who are not in sororities who like to wear the big t-shirt, little short trend, which, it's a fashion choice. And then there's the availability bias. So, did you know that it is actually more likely that you will get into a car accident than an airplane or a helicopter crash? But people are more scared of helicopters and plane crashes. Why? Based on the availability bias, it's because we have access to that information more readily. What do you see do you see every car crash on the news? No, because it happens so often, it would be flooding our news channel. But we see a lot of small plane crashes and helicopter crashes on the news because they don't happen statistically very as often, and so they're newsworthy. But because they are on the news, that information is made available to us. It makes it seem more likely to happen than it is. So it's just sometimes we think that our decisions are going to be based on what information is available to us, and that information is not always going to be reliable. I'm going to stop here for part 3.